Most people went off in a wave of patriotic enthusiasm and thought the war would be over with in 6 or 8 weeks, at the most 4 or 5 months, and of course it's going to go on for 4 horrible years.
The farther they were from home, the more they tended to think about what was going on at home, and the letters they did get from home reminded them that the situation in Arkansas was not particularly good.
I think they had perhaps an unrealistic view of what battle was going to be like. They were in for a very rude awakening very quickly.
One by one, men would rush up and carry that flag to keep it from coming down. And by the time the battle was over, there were 10 men that had been shot down carrying that flag.
The first sentence in Tom's last letter home is, "This is a lonesome time for me," and I think that pretty much sums up the experience for both brothers to a large degree. Tom and Alex Spence both joined the Confederate Army in 1861, so they were among the earliest to join the Confederate Army. The men who enlisted in 1861 were the most motivated soldiers, the ones who, immediately answered the call to battle.
One of the really amazing things, I think, about particularly soldiers like the Spence brothers who came from Arkansas is the fact that they walked. They went largely by foot from Arkansas, across the river, into Kentucky and Tennessee, and then down to Georgia, and then back to Tennessee again. The vast majority of this on foot, and this is bound to have had an effect on the Army.
Farm boys came from fairly isolated communities, and perhaps they had not ever had mumps or measles or smallpox or chickenpox. And so childhood diseases, including whooping cough, swept through these encampments.
For the Confederate soldier, especially for the private soldier, it was very difficult to even get food as the war progressed. Especially toward the end of the war, you might be lucky to get perhaps a cup of beans and a little bit of flour every other day.
Part of what happens to soldiers over time is you get the kind of bonding that allows these small units to survive really horrendous experiences, not only death, but simply living day in and day out under very difficult conditions, very poor food, minimum medical care, if any medical care at all.
I've had a slight fever every day for the last 10 days. Comes on about 7 in the morning and lasts until 2 in the evening. I am very weak. Tell Mother not to be uneasy about me. Alex Spence, December 25th, 1861.
I think if the regiment was to stop for a few days, I'd get well. I have fever every day. There's but one man killed in their regiment at Richmond. He was captain of a company from Hempstead County. I was sick on the day of the fight, not able to partake of it. Captain Calloway commanded my company. Tom Spence, Georgetown, Kentucky, September 18th, 1862.
I think soldiers from Arkansas and Texas did take great pride in their performance. They took great pride in the fact that Pat Claiborne was an Arkansan. And it's important to remember also that these troops had been disparaged by many of the troops east of the Mississippi River in the Confederate Army. So I think that they probably felt like they had something to prove.
We spend a lot of time today thinking about whether these men were fighting for states' rights or something like that, but at least for the younger men, it was their chance simply to prove themselves as men. Their fathers had often proven themselves in the Mexican War, their grandfathers in the War of 1812, their great-grandfathers in the American Revolution, and this was going to be their war.
When you see paintings of battles taking place in the war, generally every battle scene would have flags in it from both sides. And the reason was the flags were so important in battle. They stood for at least two things that were really important. One was command and control, and the other was that they were just an immense source of motivation for the troops.
For Alex Spence, the capture of the flag at Ringgold Gap was probably one of the proudest moments that he felt during service. The flags were the symbol of their unit pride, and to capture an enemy's flag was one of the greatest accomplishments that a soldier could do in the course of battle.
On the 22nd of July, we were in the most desperate battle I was ever engaged in. Our division got in the rear of Sherman's army, and you may guess we had some hard fighting to do. We charged the Yankees and drove them from their lines of thin ditches, capturing 16 pieces of artillery and any number of prisoners and small arms. Texas and Arkansas soldiers are head and shoulders above any troops in this army. Our division is the main prop of Hood's army. We have a good name and a reputation, but it took hard fighting to sustain it. Alex Spence, August 10, 1864, trenches near Atlanta.
We had a very hard fight with the federal troops on last Saturday morning. The enemy attacked us about sunup. We was all taken on surprise. I never saw the like of dead men in life. One mini ball glanced my forefinger on my left hand. The barrel of my shotgun was shot through, which you will see. I took a mini musket from a dead Dutchman. We had to fight the Kansas Rangers, the best drilled troops in Missouri. It will appear in the papers that all of our company did well. Tom Spence, Springfield, Missouri, August 12, 1861.
Certainly, black troops fighting for the North, I think made a large difference in the outcome of the war. And some Southerners recognized that. But Southern soldiers in particular, I think, tended to resent the fact that African American troops were wearing Union blue. They did not see them as equals and often did not treat them according to the rules of war.
Fighting in an area where you were a former slaves, you have slave masters and others who highly resented the whole concept of black men marching through and giving orders and so forth. So the basic operation was not to take a black soldier as prisoner.
Tom and Alex Spence came from a slave-owning family, and it does come through several times, that they considered the right of owning slaves as part of the natural order for them. They both request the services of servants with them in the field.
And so the Spence brothers are, I'm pretty sure, seeing other soldiers being aided and serviced by these slaves. And so in the same return, they asked for their slaves to be sent to them.
Tell Paul I have been disappointed in not getting some money and that Negro from home. Suppose, though, he has no opportunity of sending it. Be certain and send me the Negro boy. A Negro I think is safer in the Army than anywhere else now. And as for the money, I am actually needing it. Alex Spence, Dalton, Georgia, March 7, 1864.
One of the saddest aspects of Alex Spence's death is that he found love while he was in the Army. He met Miss Amanda Wilson in Madison, Georgia. They met, fell in love, became engaged, and were never able to carry through the wedding because he was killed at Franklin.
2 years ago today has it been since that dark, dark shadow crossed my pathway, and I was left with a blotted heart to mourn the loss of one whom I had learned to idolize. I had first taken from my trunk a bundle of letters and read them over as I used so often to do when I was sad. Some of my friends have wondered why I keep them, but these dear mementos will ever occupy their accustomed place in my trunk. Amanda Wilson, Madison, Georgia, November 30th, 1866.
Most soldiers that went off to war and had to face combat had no experience with it. So no one knew what to expect, and most of these were green troops until they were first fired on.
I don't know if they ever got totally used to it. If you read the diaries and letters, they do get hardened to the experience somewhat. But it's one of the questions I've always asked myself is how these men from these backgrounds managed to charge into this hailstorm of lead.
When the battle casualties and lists came, you would see whole towns that had lost most of their young people. So some areas were particularly hard hit. And some families were particularly hard hit, as in the case of the Spence brothers, where two men die in the Civil War, and that's not uncommon for that to happen.
In a lot of ways, they would have been the best hope for Arkansas after the war. They were the leaders of their generation, and they were pretty much wiped out during the course of the Civil War.